On the road to Macstock with Dave Hamilton of the Mac Geek Gab. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by MacVoices Live, our weekly live panel discussion of what is going on in the Apple space, as well as the larger tech world, and how it is impacting you. Join us live at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, or whatever time that is wherever you are, at youtube.com/MacVoicesTV, and participate in the chat, or catch the edited and segmented versions of the show on the regular MacVoices channels and feeds. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we're going down the road to Macstock. We will be in Crystal Lake, Illinois in July at Macstock. We wish you were there with us, but you gotta do something. You gotta go and register. That means Macstock Conference and Expo.com. That's where you'll get to do it. We'll tell you a little more at the end of the show. For right now, though, we're going to talk to Dave Hamilton of Mac Geek Gab and a bunch of other podcasts. Dave, good to see you as always.
It's good to see you too, Chuck. Thanks for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate it because we want to have all of our friends at Macstock, and we want to give them reasons to come. You're a reason to come.
Oh, I thought I was a reason to stay away.
No.
I thought they put me on the bill to help sort of temper demand.
No. You're, in fact, they're going to put you on a pedestal. I understand they're going to have spotlights and fireworks, and
we're trying to get approval for the fireworks indoors. It'll be fine. I'm just going to hand out sparklers to everybody. It'll be fine. No worries. The conference center. Mike doesn't even know. It's totally okay.
Yeah, approvals. We don't need approvals.
Yeah, it's better to get forgiveness than permission. It's certainly easier.
Yes, exactly. So we're asking folks to talk about what they're going to be talking about. We don't want you to give the presentation here, but we want you to find out what it is that you're going to be delivering so maybe we can prepare a little. Is what you're going to talk about something we should prepare for?
I think it's something I should prepare for. And you're making me realize that you're saying I need to have a topic in mind is what we're doing here. No. I do have a topic in mind. What day will this episode release? Just out of curiosity, Chuck?
I have no idea. To be honest with you.
We are recording this right around the 19th anniversary of Mac Geek Gab, which is June 13th. We started in 2005. And so that means that come Macstock time in mid-July, I will be in my 20th year of podcasting, because Mac Geek Gab was the first podcast I ever did. And then, like you said, I do some others. But so I started thinking about that as I was thinking about Macstock and other shows. I like to present it at various conferences, and I started thinking, okay, well, wait a minute. I've never really been comfortable just promoting myself. I'm always happy promoting like the things that I do, or certainly the things that our teams do, and that sort of thing, or the shows that we work with, or whatever. But we decided earlier this year that it was time to start promoting Dave a little bit, and that's good. I'm told it's good for the business, Chuck. So I was outvoted is really what it came down to. But in looking at that, I was like, well, wait, this is going to be the 20th year of Mac Geek Gab. Also means the 20th year of me podcasting. And so it was with that lens that I started thinking about, well, what kind of talks could I give this year? What kind of presentations could I give this year that would sort of fit into that overall theme? And one question I get a lot from both podcasters and non-podcasters is, what is your workflow like? I allude to it a lot on the show, or when people ask about it, I'll share little snippets, or sometimes I get excited about some new piece of tech or some change I've made to my workflow, and I'll talk about it. And then people are like, wait, how do you do what you do? That doesn't... I want to know. So I am going to answer that question on stage. I'm going to show kind of the entire workflow, which, yes, will include how I mix the audio live, but also how we prepare for the show and how we leverage things like Apple's shortcuts to prepare for the show and syncing of like notes and how we do it both in ahead of time and in real time, like while we're doing the show. So there's going to be a lot of workflow efficiency kind of things that are part of the narrative of the session that we'll talk about and learn. And then there'll be some of the, we'll touch on some of the nerdy things of like how the audio is routed and stuff like that. But, my whole vision when I started Mac Geek Gab, this was, 2005. We'd been running the Mac Observer for 6 years or maybe 7, depending on, it's probably 6.5. And somebody convinced me that we should, get into this new thing called podcasting. Right. Fine. Yep. I agree. Sure. And like most things, it was my thought that I would create the workflow and then pass it off to someone else. I have failed at the second part of that. But we'll talk. I'm happy to talk about why. There's actually an interesting story with Steve Jobs that I don't know if you've ever heard before.
Doesn't sound familiar. No, I want to hear that.
Okay, well, remind me because I'll forget. But so it was, with that in mind, that okay, I need to create this, and it needs to be something I can pass off, and I have passed it off. Like when we did daily observations, Jeff Gamet initially was the host, and he used sort of a iteration of the workflow that I created. But the whole idea was I knew I had a lot going on in my, in my work life, in my personal life too, then and still now. And somehow I knew that release schedule consistency was important for podcasting. I'm not sure why I knew this. We were very early days. Maybe as a podcast listener, I had come to rely on, okay, Adam Curry's daily source code is coming out every day. And I want today's episode. And if there's not today's episode by, 10 in the morning, I start to wonder. So for whatever reason, I understood release schedule consistency was important. I also knew audio quality was important. And so it was with those two things in mind that I came my podcasting prime directive that I called it, which was being able to release the show, like publish the show within 15 minutes of stopping recording. And the reason I set that for myself was I'm a perfectionist if I let myself be a perfectionist. So if I let myself edit the audio, right? If I knew that if I was going to go through and meticulously like tweak things and edit out ums and ahs and all that stuff, the episode would never be released on time. Like on time would become this very fungible concept. And so it was like, all right, do all the work ahead of time, prepping the agenda for the show, coming up with whatever the narrative arc of the episode was, so that I didn't have to, move things around and chop up the audio afterwards or any of that. And then also the audio recording workflow so that I could mix the show live and I wouldn't have to go back and adjust levels and all of those things. And so that's the workflow that I came up with. And by and large, the gist of it hasn't changed in 20 years. The tech of it has changed dramatically in 20 years. And now I'm able to do it all digitally inside the computer, which was not entirely the easiest thing to have done back then. I suppose it would have been possible, but now it's way more reliable. And but again, I've always had a co-host with Mac Geek Gab, and so we needed a way to collaborate on things ahead of time so that we had the material prepped in order to go and do the show. And that's where like shortcuts, we used to use Apple Script a lot. That's migrated to, I think it's entirely in shortcuts now. I don't think we're using any Apple Script. So, which is great. I mean, because Apple Script doesn't run on my phone, but Shortcuts sure does. And so it means I can do some from my phone, which in the past was not a default part of the workflow. Let's put it that way. So I talk a lot. Have questions?
Well, I've got a lot of questions, but unfortunately, most of them are going to probably be answered by your session, so I'm going to stay away from those.
Great, perfect, yeah.
But saying that, okay, I know you, and I know I've heard this discussed on Geek Gab, and you and I've had conversations offline, and so I want to make sure that the folks who say, well, this all sounds great, Dave, but I'm not into podcasting, and I'm not going to start a podcast. There are some really good reasons to be excited about this session because, and I will shift over for a second to another podcast you do called Business Brain, where you talk a lot about efficiency and mindset and all. That's where this session will be for everyone, even if you have no intention of starting a podcast.
That's correct.
That's my guess. Is that correct?
No, that's exactly my intention with this too. Like I said, I'll certainly share some of the nerdier things about how the show is done. And I will take that liberty for a couple of reasons. A, I mean, it is sort of part of the topical nature of the session. B, there are some podcasters that are going to be in attendance at Macstock. And C, the most important reason, a lot of people who attend Macstock are Mac Geek Gab listeners, and showing a little bit of the behind the curtain is something that our listeners tend to like, even if it's not something they're going to do themselves. So there will be that behind the curtain, but absolutely the gist and focus of this is about thinking intentionally about whatever it is you do in your personal life, work life, that you can. Automation is part of it, sure, but just thinking about it and making it as efficient as possible and leveraging Apple's tech to do that is or tech that can be used on a Mac. Some of it is Apple's tech, some of it is third-party tech, but it's all available to us as Apple users. And that really is the focus is let's zoom out to 10,000 feet. Here's how I've implemented these approaches, but let's talk about the approaches and how you might be able to adapt those or implement those in your personal life or your work life or whatever it is.
I'd like to make a request for you to add or include in your presentation.
Yeah, go.
So here we go. Pardon me. Obviously, you don't want to focus too much on how things started, but as you go through, I'd love to hear how some of the thinking as well as the hardware and software have evolved. Because I think on my side of this, I'm a podcaster, and I know if I stop and think about it, I'm not sure there's a single thing that I'm using that I started out with. And so I would be really interested to know, and you don't need to go back to day one, but just, sort of the thinking, how it's evolved and why you've made the choices you've made, aside from what you just said, the push toward efficiency.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm trying to think about what hasn't evolved, and perhaps a better way to ask that question of myself, based on the things that I know about myself, is what didn't need to evolve, because some things have evolved because they can, but didn't need to. Like for example, I could still be using the same microphone that I started with, right? Like I started with a Shure SM58, which is a really classic dynamic microphone. It's still a good podcasting microphone, right? Like it sounds good. It's got a tight polar pattern, meaning like if you go off axis on it, it gets quieter and that sort of thing. I could still be using a Shure SM58. I'm not, but that's because I'm a gear nerd and I like to, but I don't change microphones often because that's part of my sound, not just for the audience, but for me. If I were to change to a different microphone right now suddenly I sound different to me while I'm doing the show. And that messes with my brain for a little while before I get used to it. So, but yeah, interesting. I'm still using Audio Hijack, which was absolutely a part of the workflow on day one. I couldn't have done what I did without it. And now it was called Audio Hijack Pro back then. I think I was certainly one of, if not the first person to think to use it for podcasting. But I don't know, maybe Adam Christensen, maybe he also used it, but it's also possible Adam Curry was using Audio Hijack. I mean, it was the app to like be able to route audio on your Mac. But yeah, I still use it, but I don't have to. I could now do everything that I'm doing and record elsewhere. Anyway, it's an interesting question. Now you're getting me. This is great. I like this. Yeah. Well, and folks, I will attempt to be judicious about including Chuck's request in my presentation, because I could get very pedantic about it and talk about each step of the workflow. And here's how we used to do this. Here's how we did it 10 years ago. Here's how we did it 5 years ago. Here's how we did it now. I will do that for myself, and I will put it through what I call on Mac Geek Gab the 20% filter. Is this going to be interesting or valuable to at least 20% of the people who have to listen to it? If not, it gets dumped. So
yeah, and you said it well. I mean, I'm just interested, I guess, in how it's evolved and how you've become more efficient, to your point. Because back when we started, we were all cobbling things together, taking pieces of software and hardware that were never intended for this and making them work. So now, and I also think that might be encouraging to people who think, wow, doing a podcast is hard and I got to have this and I got to have that. And, now things are built for podcasting.
Yes.
So that, and that's, and listen, even skip podcasting and just think about maybe what you could do for your business, your school, your church, your civic organization, whatever, that you never intend necessarily to publish out on the internet for the world to see, but you just want to do it for your organization, whichever one of those applies to you. A lot of this stuff can apply to that, not just podcasting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. So, even the audio specific portion of it would apply. And yeah, it's not going to be all just audio. It's going to be, hopefully a nice blend of it all. So,
well, yeah, because you all are now doing video as well.
Yes. So. Yeah. Well, but I mean, I should say not just the podcasting element of it, but the overall like efficiency idea too. So, but right. Yes, you're right. Yeah, we do video with every show now. I don't know why I got myself into that. It's your fault, Chuck. I'm going to blame you.
Well, that's okay. I've been blamed for worse. So.
Yes, you have.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for acknowledging that on the show, Dave.
Yeah,
appreciate
you're welcome.
That. Yeah. Oh man. So, what can I say? I mean, Macstock is always a blast. We get to see so many friends. We get to meet new friends. I know every year I come home with at least one or two friendships that really do stand the test of time. And if nothing else, you get to see people and then you see them the next year and you know who they are. And, it's great to see them.
I really like Macstock. It took me, I've always liked it. It took me a while to understand that it was valuable both from a warming my soul standpoint, which is immediately obvious and is the overarching vibe, right? Like the whole community aspect of it and getting to being able to get together with this community is my favorite part about Macstock. I like to be there as an attendee more than I like to be there as a speaker because I just like don't get me wrong. I'm happy to speak. It's not like somebody's twisting my arm. I mean, Mike is, but that's different. But we, just being able to get together, it's old home week. And like you said, old friends and new friends alike, everyone is welcome. It's not this insular thing. It's very open arms and everyone's welcome. And if you've never been there before, you'll probably figure out real fast that you are among friends that you just didn't yet know you had is kind of how Macstock goes. But so that part was always obvious. the business investment return on investment part of me kind of would look after every year at Macstock and be like, okay, what did we pay to put how many of us, especially when we were still running Mac Observer and we're paying to fly several people out, and of course I guess I'm doing the same thing now. But it was history repeats itself, Chuck. And it was we'd look at the numbers afterwards and be like, okay, well, was this worth it? Like, that's a lot of money to, spend, but it really does pay off from the business standpoint too. I do get to sit there. There is an overwhelming majority of attendees who either already are or become listeners to Mac Geek Gab, and not just casual listeners, but advocates for the show. And there's a lot of value in that, right? Like from a strictly business standpoint. Nothing I do is strictly business. I think that's probably obvious, but I'm always thinking about, okay, well, where can we spend our money? Because we can't spend it everywhere because we don't have that much. So there's that for sure. But then also being able, that immersive part of it, where the part where I am, an attendee. And when I say that, it's because at Macstock, there is no green room, or at least there hasn't been in the past. Speakers are not sectioned off from the rest of the conferences, the conference attendees. Like, I've been to conferences where you never mingle. It's like, oh, you're speaking, you're backstage, you do your thing, they wire you up. Okay, go, and you go out on stage and you do your thing and you walk backstage, and then you go back to your hotel room, you fly home, and that's the end of it. Right. And it's fine. Hopefully they paid you for it, because otherwise, why'd you go? But at Macstock, and I realize we're at a different venue this year, so some of these logistics will be different, but I know that the vibe will be exactly the same. Is that, I'm sitting there in the audience for your session or Kirshen's session or Allison's session. And then it's like, oh, guess what, Dave, it's time for your session. It's like, okay, here I go, and I go up on stage and I do my thing. And then as soon as I finish, I'm back to the audience. Like, it is a very everyone is equal vibe there. And that extends into the before and after hours of the conference too. If somebody, if we're at the hotel, and again, it's a different, I've never been to the hotel that we're going to be at this year, so I don't know the vibe, but being in the lobby of the hotel, people would just come up and you just talk to each other. There's no separation. There's no hierarchy is probably the right term. Everyone is equal. And I love that, because I get to have those conversations, those interactive conversations with people who are either our listeners or are similar enough to our listeners that I get to hear what is of interest to them. And I get to let them talk to me, as opposed to what happens on the show, which is just me talking too much. And so from a warming my heart and soul standpoint, that's awesome. But also from a business standpoint, listening to all of you and being able to interact with you, and just hopefully this doesn't sound creepy, even just watching you and seeing what you gravitate towards, and watching people as they watch other presentations. And it's like, oh, okay, like this is really interesting. People are super into whatever. Huh. All right. Maybe I've never even thought about being into that. Maybe I'm gonna dabble in that and see. And then maybe that makes it into the show. So it's absolutely a valuable thing on several levels. So
your comments about everybody being equal, that has been, like you say, a hallmark of Macstock from day one. And I too like that, because being podcasters, we have audiences, but we are interacting with them on kind of a one-way basis. Sure, you have email and feedback and whatever, but it's not quite the same as somebody saying, hey, do you have a second? I'd like to tell you what I like or what I don't like. And that is super valuable. I agree with you. But also the idea that I always come home from Macstock with a notebook or an iPhone or whatever full of ideas, thoughts, things I want to look up, things I want to try, things I want to follow up on.
Yep.
So I don't want everybody to think, no, we're not just going to Crystal Lake and singing Kumbaya. There's a lot of takeaways from it that will benefit you. And just like with the sessions we're talking about,
yeah,
for you, I'm anxious to get some of those takeaways from you. I wouldn't even know what to ask at this point, but you will throw them in front of me and it's like, oh yeah, okay, that's good. I can use that. So
yep. Yeah. And then we get to have those conversations. I love attending the sessions. Last year, the way the venue worked, the Wi-Fi, quite frankly, sucked in the venue, and no one had easy access to data. Certainly you could have tethered with your phone, or maybe you got lucky and the Wi-Fi worked for you. You were the one person, for that 30-minute block that was blessed with the Wi-Fi. But by and large, nobody had Wi-Fi. And so it really was kind of nice that everybody just paid attention. But it wasn't all that different from when we were in a venue where we did have Wi-Fi. And my guess is this venue is probably going to have it's more of a conference specific venue. So I think a good chance of it all being fine. But yeah, everybody's just there. When I go to Macstock, my hope is that I am the one who learns the most from everybody else's sessions or the questions you asked during my session. I learned a long time ago at Macstock, this is certainly the case. MacTech was another. I don't know if MacTech will ever come back, but that was a conference where, a lot of really knowledgeable people. And even when I'm on stage, I am under no illusion that I am even close to the smartest person in the room, and generally not even about the topic that I'm currently speaking on. There's always going to be someone, or maybe multiple someones, who know more about some specific aspect of it than I do. And the first time it happened to me when I was on stage, I was actually doing a Synology presentation at Macstock, and somebody asked a question, a third of the way in, and it was like, oh crap, like, wow, I don't even know what they're talking about, let alone have a way to formulate an answer that fuels my misconception that I'm the smartest person about Synology right now. And so in that moment, I just had to agree with myself to embrace it. It's like, okay, wait a minute. This is great. We're all here. I'm the facilitator of the moderator of this conversation, but I absolutely don't need to be the one who knows the most. And that person that just asked a question proved that to me. And if I played my cards wrong, they would prove it to everybody else in the room too, at my expense, right. And it's true at Macstock too. There's always, you can always learn even about the things that you know a lot about. There's always somebody that's got a different angle to it or whatever. And so I always go in with kind of that sponge attitude where I want to learn the most, and I'm happy to have somebody offer a comment or a question in the middle. It's like, oh, wow, yeah, I never thought about that before. That's amazing. We should talk afterwards. I want to learn this, so yeah, I'm looking, and so I look forward to that. There's always smart people there. Yeah.
Well, and I'll add one last thing, and that is just what you said. Everybody is approachable. Every speaker, every attendee. There's nobody, again, to your point, that is sitting in a green room or does their session and dashes out. Occasionally you'll have someone that has a family obligation that has to leave early. But
yeah. Of course.
But it's that's it. We're all equal. We're all there to share. We're all there to sponge and to share both.
Yep.
So
I do have a question for you, Chuck, before we go.
Sure.
We're trying to last year, and we've done this in previous years in different sort of permutations. Last year, the final session on Saturday, which was the first day, was the Mac Geek Gab caucus, right? And we had on stage everybody who happened to be there, who has ever been either a host or co-host or a guest even on Mac Geek Gab. We had this panel of, I think there was 6 or 7 of us or something. And we did that, and it was very well received. There is talk of doing that again, but there is not room in the schedule to do it as the final session of the day on either Saturday or Sunday, because Mike's got lots of great sessions that he wants to fit in, which is great. So the idea that we're sort of tossing around is, do we do this as the after hours event on Saturday? So everybody, we do our sessions on Saturday, we break for dinner, and then we come back to the conference room or somewhere else and do some kind of Mac Geek Gab, whether it'll be a Mac Geek Gab caucus or something else. That part I'm not sure about, but that's easy enough to kind of pull together. The thoughts on that? Because I'm torn on whether it makes sense to have more content in the evening or let the evening be the more organic conversational time. Because I just love that organic, time together. So,
well, pardon me. Boy, I'm not the organizer, so
no.
But I've absolutely the organic time. But there's no reason what you're proposing can't be or wouldn't be organic to start with. You guys might be the facilitators of some of it and steer some of the conversations, but I guarantee you people are going to have opinions and they want to hear from you, but they also want to throw questions, comments at you and go from there. So, that's what, what it was like, especially last year's is the most recent thing.
Yeah.
We ended up taking over the hotel lobby with, all kinds of people. And sometimes the whole group was talking. Sometimes there were little parts that broke off into separate conversations. That's just the way it happens. But I hope this is not an insult, but I don't see what you're proposing as content as more just interaction.
No, it did no insult at all. That helps me frame it, because my perception of that is different than like your perception of that. It's because we're having different experiences. I'm on stage, thinking about 17 things, are people talking over each other? What's this going to be like audio wise afterwards if we release this as a Mac Geek Gab episode, and then also trying to steer the conversation. So for me, it is work, right? It is not downtime conversational time. And there are elements of it where I get to do that, but then there's also all the other things. So my perception of it is valuable probably only to me. And so that's why I asked you the question, because you experienced that last year and in other years when we've done, similar kind of things from the perspective of the audience. And that was, or from the perspective of everyone who is not Dave.
Right.
And that's the important perspective, is why I asked. Yeah.
Well, okay. So one year you did a Mac Geek Gab show specifically, in front of an audience.
Yes.
And so what I'm hearing is this might not be the same. You're not proposing necessarily exactly the same thing, but hey, it can be new. And are you, now I'll throw it back at you. Are you being a little bit too much of a perfectionist in what you want this to be? Or are you willing to just throw it against the wall and see what happens?
Well, everything I do is thrown against the wall, John. No, my hesitation here is extremely selfish. Now that I hadn't stopped to think about this. So you're hearing these thoughts as they are crystallizing or not in real time. My hesitation is selfish. I don't want to miss out on that downtime that I value so greatly at Macstock. And when I'm doing the show at Macstock, it is a different experience for me than sitting on the couch in the lobby and having that truly organic conversation. So if I'm going to do it, I need to do it in a way that's going to feed that part of me. And there probably is a way to make that happen. So,
well, and your perception from your side is absolutely fair, because if I were proposing it, then yeah, I'd be a little more stressed over, is this going to be valuable? And yeah, but again, any place else you might be a little stressed. At Macstock, again, for all the reasons we just finished talking about in the last half hour, I think that anything you do that is remotely interesting, and that just by the very nature of you doing it is going to be interesting, is going to be well accepted by the group.
Okay. Yeah. I need to talk to Mike about the logistics of it just to confirm or find out how much of the recording of it I would need to be a part of in real time, as opposed to is that being handled by the venue or whatever? Because if it is, then it becomes far less like work for me, if that makes sense.
Good. Yeah. Very good point.
Do I have to spend 30 minutes setting up, my laptop with this and that and the other thing? And what's that going to be like? So yeah. All right. This is good. Thank you. I appreciate you workshopping this with me. It's good.
Yeah. Well, this was unexpected, but so there you go, folks. This is how the sausage gets made.
That's it.
We just did it this time on camera instead of after the show.
That's right. Yeah. Well, you could cut this out,
No. How many times do we get to see Dave Hamilton crystallize things right in front of us? No,
more often than you think.
Maybe so, but I'm not sure I'm buying it. Oh gosh. So folks, you got to come. I mean, this is the kind of thing that you will experience, whether it's on stage, off stage, in the hotel lobby, whatever. These kind of free-form conversations. Dave, I know Mike has given the speakers a code to save $30 on attending. Do you have yours?
I think so. Indeed, Mike did. It is the code is simple. It is Mac Geek Gab, all one word.
Great. So Dave's code is Mac Geek Gab. Mine is MacVoices. I don't care which one you use. I just want you to use one. Or if you don't even use it, that's fine too. Pay the extra $30. It applies to both the 2-day package and the 3-day package. Sorry, you can't stack them, so you can only use one because somebody's going to ask. Somebody's going to ask.
But I want to say, in addition to you getting $30 off by using either one of those codes, MacVoices or Mac Geek Gab, we also get $30. So you're supporting us at the same time, and that's an awesome thing.
Yeah. So Macstock Conference and Expo. Go register. And look, if you don't know anybody, if this is your first time, drop me an email or drop Dave an email. He has plenty of ways to connect. And we will make sure that you are greeted warmly because we really want you there.
Absolutely.
We really want you there.
And come say hi, please. It's the part about there not being any hierarchy. Not only is it true, but it is something I believe very strongly in. So I am happy to be a part of continuing to foster that vibe. So if we've never met, just come say hi. That's
Absolutely. A quick update before we wrap up. As of the release of this recording, there will be a live Mac Geek Gab on Friday night after the Macstock workshops. Watch the Macstock Conference and Expo.com page for all the details. But as of now, it looks like that live session is a go, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Dave, before we go, I want to make sure, as we've referenced it a couple times, I want to make sure that you do a quick rundown of all the shows that you do so people know how they can connect with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's Mac Geek Gab at macgeekgab.com. That's a show where we do Q&A for Apple users. It's not only Apple technology that we talk about, but we all are Apple users. And so it's Q&A and tips and tricks and stuff for making the most of your technology. I do another show that you mentioned, Chuck, called Business Brain at businessbrain.show. That's a show for entrepreneurs, but really it's about, we say it's about collectively tuning our business brains together so that we take a couple of ideas each episode and just dissect them so that we can always be thinking with our business brains about making things more efficient or making things more profitable or things like that. And then I do a show called Gig Gab at giggabpodcast.com for musicians or people who are interested in music, specifically live music. And that show has evolved this year. I used to do it with Paul Kent as my co-host, and Paul's schedule meant that he couldn't do the show as routinely anymore. So I now am doing a show of my own, Chuck, for the first time in all of my years of podcasting. But I have guests on most of the time, and we've had some really fascinating guests. We had Matt Musty, the drummer from Train. We had Robert Scoville recently, who is the front of house engineer doing stadiums with Kenny Chesney. We have other musicians whose names you don't know out of the gate, but you will once you finish the episode. And everybody has interesting things to share, and we always have a good time. So, yeah, those are the three things I do.
Right. So reach out to Dave on through any of those channels.
Yeah.
Because I'm not in fact, I'm not a musician of any kind. I don't partake of Gig Gab, but I do listen to both of the others and look forward to every single one, because I at the very least, it makes me think about things. And
yeah.
I love that part.
I know you're a live music fan, Chuck, so I'm going to think about an episode of Gig Gab that might be something you would find interesting, because we have a lot of, quite candidly, people like you who listen to Gig Gab, people who are fans of live music and enjoy knowing how the sausage is made. And we were surprised when we found that we had listeners that were not musicians and had no designs on becoming one. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, definitely. Because my impression has always been, and especially from some of these summaries I saw when you and Paul were doing it, that it was very much back of the house, musician oriented. This is how we write the contracts. This is how we set up, and not something that I can relate to. So I see he's going to take up more of my time, folks, and I'm going to love it. That's going to be the problem. I'm going to love it. One last time, and I'll steal Dave's line. If you want your soul warmed, join us at Macstock Conference and Expo. It's going to be a blast. Dave, thank you so much for the time and also for the brainstorming. I love this.
Thanks. Oh, I appreciate it. Same. It's super valuable to me. Thanks for having me here, Chuck.
I'm Chuck Joyner, folks. This is MacVoices. I hope to see you in Crystal Lake at Macstock. As always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.